So we're into the third week of movie month. And yeah, I've had all my hair cut off because I prefer to have my hair shorter usually, and just decided to finally get it all chopped off. And hopefully I'm going to dye it again soon as well, just so I get that out of the way. Yeah, so today, instead of reviewing one film, which I've already done, I thought I would review 3 films. And the reason I've chosen these 3 films might become a little bit obvious. Those films are Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger. Yes, the first 3 James Bond films. I actually got the box set recently from my brother because he was getting rid of a load of his old DVDs, and I've wanted to watch the earlier Doctor Who films for quite a while, because I've seen some of the more recent ones, and I've always been kind of curious what the original ones were like, because I've seen clips and I've seen bits of the movies throughout the years, but I've never actually sat down and watched them. And seeing as I'm a big fan of 60s television, as well as The Man from U.N.C.L.E., it seemed like something that I should finally sit down and watch. And the reason I decided to watch the first 3, well, at first I just decided to watch the first one over the weekend and the second one, and then I started to notice that there were a lot of things missing, as in a lot of things that we associate with James Bond that didn't seem to be in the first film or even the second film. And so I decided to watch the third one, and that's when a lot of the things we associate with James Bond does sort of come into it. And it's quite interesting to see the films develop from Dr. No to Goldfinger. I mean, for starters, there is no theme song. You know, one of the most iconic things about James Bond is its opening theme, and its opening in general. And yet there is no Dr. No theme song. There is a From Russia with Love theme song, but it's only played at the end of the film. And even then it doesn't have the big bombastic sort of style that we're used to. So that was kind of weird. We also don't get the sort of him being shown his gadgets. You know, there's usually a scene with him and Q shows him all of these cool things that he's obviously going to use throughout the mission. And even though we get a little bit of that in From Russia with Love with like a briefcase, that's about all we get. And it's not until Goldfinger that we actually get a proper one of those scenes. And of course, that's when we first get the proper theme. One of the things we do get introduced to in the first film is the Bond girl. Because of course, every James Bond film has to have a Bond girl. And in the first one, it's Ursula Andress, who only appears like halfway through the film, but in a very famous coming out of the water in a white bikini, swimsuit sort of thing. So, yeah. And From Russia with Love had some woman who again only comes into about halfway through. But it wasn't until Goldfinger again that we're introduced to the Bond girl's famous pun names, like Pussy Galore, which probably wouldn't fly so much these days, but they certainly got away with it back in the 60s. She was actually, in my opinion, of the 3 Bond girls that we see in the first 3, she's actually the best one, because she's the only one that has a real attitude. I mean, Ursula Andrews sort of does, in that she doesn't really want his help at first, but Honor Blackman's Pussy Galore is the first one. I mean, she's a pilot. She's like a second-hand, like right-hand man almost. But unfortunately, there is a scene where she is seduced. It's actually an alright scene to start with, because the 2 of them are just kind of fighting, and that's kind of fun. But then she gets kind of forced upon, and it's kind of a rapey scene. And then suddenly she's willing to help him, so that's a little bit... Yeah, again, you wouldn't get away with that nowadays. And that is the thing with James Bond. I was trying to watch it, trying to open with an open mind of just how much he seduces the women and how much they fall for his charm. And yes, they do. And they try to make it show that he's not completely forcing himself on them. I think that was really the closest, at least, of the 3 films to have him really. But it is almost like, yeah, I know he's supposed to be charming and attractive, but... yeah, women really do fall for him a bit too easily. And also, they're all blonde. Is there not a single brunette? At least not in the 60s, there sure wasn't. Obviously, nobody wanted to be a brunette in the 60s. But hey. But what did I think of the films as a whole? The one I probably liked the most probably was Goldfinger, just because it's got a lot of the things we associate with James Bond. So the things I recognise. However, the other films did have its moments. The weird thing I do find is, as much as I like 60s television, I'm not the biggest fan of the movies necessarily. Maybe the formula that they have for some of these is just a bit too long in films, and they work for nice little less than an hour TV series. But saying that, they do have some good fight scenes. I really like the end fight scene of Goldfinger. It has some very classic lines in it, like, you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die! Quoted like crazy, but it's funny now, watching it. Although why Goldfinger actually kept him alive, it's like, yes, I'm going to bluff you, you're going to call my bluff, and then you're going to take me along to stuff, tell me your plan. It just seemed a bit like, really, you're just sabotaging yourself there, mate. But the whole Fort Knox thing was quite interesting at the end. The only one I found a bit hard to understand was From Russia with Love, because the idea was it was pitting the Russians against the Brits. The Spectre, the sort of main bad guys, at least the main bad guys to start with, because they're not actually in Goldfinger. I was expecting Goldfinger to be a member of Spectre, and if he was, it's not mentioned, or it's not made very clear if he is. Whereas Dr. No and the bad guys from Russia with Love were blatantly Spectre. And yeah, I was a bit confused what was going on with From Russia with Love, because again, it is supposed to be that pitting one side against the other and Spectre's in the middle and hoping to start some kind of unrest between the two. Which, to be fair, in the 60s wouldn't have been very hard to do. But yeah, it was a bit confusing, had some slow moments. A lot of these films do have some, like there's a whole scene, which is actually okay, but in Goldfinger there is a scene where they're playing golf, and it just made me realise how boring golf is to watch. And unless you can turn the golf bag into a cannon and fire at somebody, golf is boring. And yes, they did do that in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. But yeah, it was... So yeah, the first one was also kind of cool for its sort of end, its big structures and stuff like that at the end, where he's trying to escape from radioactive... I don't know. I can't actually remember. I have seen it. I only watched it last weekend and I'm already struggling to remember what actually happened. But I also found a structure that I was hoping wasn't going to continue, which is the idea that James Bond also has a helper, a male helper along the way, who helps get him to places, get him information and stuff like that. And there was some really good ones in both Dr. No and From Russia with Love. And they both end up getting killed. Spoiler. And I was thinking, I hope this isn't a pattern, because I like the people helping. These characters seem quite interesting and quite fun. Like, there's this whole bit with gypsies, and there's this whole fight scene in a gypsy camp, and the whole scene is actually quite a lot of fun. It's a really good film. It's a really good section. So yeah, I think it's funny because I still want to watch more of them. I am going to watch Thunderball, which is the next one after this. But I don't imagine them being ones I'd want to rewatch a lot. But then again, like I said, I did very much like the sort of Bond structure of the music. As bad as they are, the sort of Bond girl puns are quite funny. And it's also quite interesting to see if any of them are actually, like, any use. Like I said, in Goldfinger, there's a whole female helicopter pilot school. You know, yeah, they're all blonde bombshells, but who cares? They're basically pilots, and they're learning to be pilots from a female pilot, and that's quite cool. It's funny thing about watching 60s shows, trying to find women who aren't just there to be seduced. So that's always interesting to try to find any sort of female character that's not just there to be killed or seduced or saved, of course, which, as I said, is a rarity. Yeah, what else I can sort of say about them? I mean, Sean Connery does play a good, suave James Bond, but so far, I'm not sure if I prefer him over any other. I mean, Daniel Craig never grabbed me much as Bond. He was a bit of a different Bond that I didn't really latch onto, but I think, weirdly, Pierce Brosnan is probably still my favourite, because he can be sort of badass and cool and charming all at once, which Sean Connery can as well, but I think Pierce Brosnan, felt like he had a bit more personality. I don't know, because I'm going to have to rewatch them. I haven't actually rewatched any of them for quite a long time. But, yeah, I can't really think of anything else. The other thing that's quite fun about watching old 60s shows is because I watch a lot of TV shows, it's interesting to see some people who've been in 60s Doctor Who appear in James Bond. And yes, I did notice a couple. So that's quite fun for me, spot the guest star. But yeah, they were, overall, I would say that they were enjoyable enough to watch. They had enough scenes in them to keep me interested, but not necessarily would say they were brilliant or necessarily my thing. But on the plus side, I do kind of want to carry on watching. I want to see what Roger Moore's like, and I want to be reminded what Timothy Dalton's like, because I know he was only in 2, but I haven't seen them for a long, long time. So I will continue with the series, and hopefully I will find a Bond film that really does grab me. So yeah, that was my sort of all over the place review of 3 very old films. But like I said, I recently watched them and they were fresh in my mind, so I thought it was quite interesting to watch them. This box set I've got only goes up to Casino Royale, but then that doesn't bother me because, as I say, I only wanted to watch the original ones anyway. I can watch all the other ones elsewhere, I'm sure. So yeah, so we've only got one more week of, or have we got 2? No, I think we've only got 1. Okay, I'm not going to say anything until I know for sure, but I'm pretty sure we've only got 1 more week of movie month. I actually don't know what I'm going to do for that one yet, so that'll be fun for me to find out as much as it will be for you, I'm sure, whoever. So yeah, I'll see you next week with whatever I have planned.